Jazz. Jazz. Jazz? And who can forget jazz? If you've seen my channel for a bit, you might know that I'm a fan of jazz. And although we've had no shortage of jazz figures in the past, sometimes I've wondered, what if we could just create our own and make one from scratch? Well, today, with the big help from B from Nectar Mechanics, we are going to do just that. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So good to have you back. As many of you may know, Jazz is the first character to have gotten 2 customs on my channel. First with the SS86 version, and then with the classic animated Jazz. And today, he's getting a 3rd. But it's not going to be a customization of an existing figure. I had the good fortune of being contacted by B from Nectar Mechanics, and if you haven't heard of his channel, I do urge you to check him out. He does some phenomenal work over there, and he offered a collaboration, but I wasn't too sure what we could do, since the bulk of my projects are customizing Transformers. But he said to me, why don't we just create one from scratch? And that just really got me excited for what could be possible. Now obviously, the sky's pretty much the limit when you're creating your own custom figure. But what really interested me was, what would a modern take on a G1 Jazz look like? Nothing too fancy, just a G1 Jazz in a modern style Porsche. So I got to work on a rough sketch on what that might actually look like. Now instead of going with a modern take of the 935 Turbo, I kind of wanted something a little bit more street legal. And although that means having a more simplified looking vehicle mode, I still envisioned it with a simple racing stripe, just as a slight callback to the G1 roots. Once I had the look sketched out, I then proceeded to make a more detailed spec sheet, added some color, and off to Nectar Mechanics it went. Really, that's all I did. I don't really feel like I contributed a whole lot, but this is where the magic starts. Once B took over, he now has to figure out the transformation, print it himself, and put it all together to make sure it works. Now, do yourself a favor, pause this video and check out his work. The link is definitely going to be in the description. Now, he is going to be using, I believe, an FDM printer, whereas I've got a resin printer myself. So we might need to go back and forth still to tweak some things. But now that he's completed the designs, we're going to go ahead and print them ourselves, try to give it a good paint job, and see how it all looks together. So as of right now, I technically have all the pieces printed, although there were a few failures sadly. This piece right here is for the front part of the shin section. One of them looks like it printed okay, but for some reason on the other one I only got about 1/4, and then it just decided to fail on me, so that's gonna have to get reprinted. And for these rear vehicle sections, there were a whole lot of supports that just failed here, but astonishingly the piece itself still printed. Although you can see where it started to sag in this section here, kind of created a crack. I think I can save this though, by maybe just filling it in with some epoxy filler and sanding it down nice and smooth. But I won't really know for sure once I remove it from the supports and see how it all fits together here. Also, again, looks like for the thigh sections, one of them printed, one of them did not. And there's a slight bit of a crack on one of them. As long as there's not too much warping, I should be able to save it. Or again, we'll just have to give it another shot. But by and large, a lot of the pieces did print successfully from the looks of it. We have the front section of the vehicle here, and it looks pretty damn good. Again, we'll know for sure once I remove it from the supports. I'm going to give it a nice sanding. We do see a few layer lines, mostly due to the angle, but I am going to try and sand those nice and smooth if I can. As smooth as possible anyways. We've got a beautiful helmet here, looks very nice. And B from Nectar Mechanics was awesome enough to have the visor and the face on separate pieces, so that's going to make it a breeze to paint. Good stuff there. But overall, this has been about 6 print sessions, each one taking about 4 hours to complete. Add that to the fact that I can only really print on the weekends means this took me a number of weeks to get through. It's about a month later now. I'm hoping with maybe one more print session, I can have those last few failures reprinted and have all the pieces that I need. But for now, I'm going to clean these up and let's see what a test assembly looks like. Okay, let's do a quick update here. As of this recording, it's been about over a month since you last heard my voice in this video. The sanding required for this figure has been just a little bit intense, but I'm happy to say that at this point, for the most part, that has been completed. There was, however, one little hiccup I had to overcome. So the first print of this figure was done with just regular standard resin. This is the resin that my printer came with, actually. And for the most part, it looked okay, but it did have a bit of sagging on some sections. Even though I had it at a 45-degree angle for the most part, some things just weren't looking all that great. And when I was doing the first test assembly, the piece that goes here on the abdomen requires a pin all the way across here, but upon inserting it, this resin just shattered. Completely fell apart on me here. And that is typically how resin is. It is pretty brittle, especially the longer you cure it with a UV light, but this was not going to work at all. And I was almost questioning whether I was going to be able to continue with this project. But I did a little bit of research, and it turns out there is something called UBS-like resin, which, as the name implies, is a more resilient type of a resin that's going to be less prone to breakage, although not exactly like UBS plastic. And I made a first test print of that, and for the most part it does look great. Now, one other change I did is to try to prevent the sagging. I went ahead and used larger supports, but when I removed them from the figure, it ended up looking just a little bit rough. Now, this could have been fixed with a lot of sanding, but since I knew I was going to have a lot of sanding regardless, I ended up reprinting it a third time. And so obviously this one's already been cleaned up. Still some minor scan lines from the print, but it's a 4K print, so I think I'm okay with it. Once we get to the priming process, I'll still be able to maybe sand it down a little bit further if I need to. But we got rid of the sagging, thankfully. And as you saw, the insertion of the pins has now been pretty successful. They are fully functional here. One thing that I've done though, because I was overly cautious, is I did drill down on the pinholes just with a little drill to make them a little bit larger, and some of them are just a little bit loose. I think I prefer to have a little bit of looseness instead of it being overly tight and preventing more breakage. Unfortunately though, I haven't been able to do just a complete reassembly, only because he's pretty floppy at this point. I can add appendages like the arm, and for the most part it will stay in place. The problem though is as the resin keeps rubbing up against the other resin, they keep sanding each other down. So any little movement and it's gonna just create more looseness. But thankfully, that's something that I'll be able to fix later on with some Kiki's joint solution that I've already used a little bit at this point. Most notably on the leg sections here. As I mentioned, whenever any pieces just rub up against each other, they just get more and more loose. And so the feet were having a hard time staying level for the figure to stand up. So I did go ahead and add quite a bit of Kiki's joint solution on the sides and on the bottom. And it's definitely made a noticeable difference. But at this point, instead of focusing on getting the joints nice and tight, I'm gonna hold off on that in the final assembly. And we are gonna start with what I am most familiar with and getting this piece nicely primed and ready for paint. Stay right there, buddy. So this project almost killed me. But we're still here, ticking, thankfully. But we do need to go over some things here. Boy, did I learn a lot. Now, obviously, I've never printed a transformer out of resin, out of anything from scratch, and you know, put it together from the ground up and whatnot. So I knew going in, this was gonna be a hell of a challenge. But then there were a lot of things that I don't think I could really anticipate just how challenging they were. So just to start off from the beginning here, I'm not an expert at resin printing. I've printed some pretty basic things, most notably my Trumpeter Bumblebee model kit nameplate for the base, and that's something that's super simple, right? So this is definitely a step up from that. And you know, I thought I had my printer pretty well calibrated. All the details are coming out fairly good looking, but one thing I found out after I printed this guy a number of times is that my printer does have a slight overexposure to it. So while the details are there, the pieces are just a little bit larger than what they're meant to be. So nothing exactly fit together straight from the printer, right? Everything needed to be sanded down. And even if it's a perfectly calibrated printer, you're still gonna have a lot of sanding. You wanna smooth things out from where the supports are and just overly clean it up. But the fact that the pieces were a little bit larger meant that every single little piece needed to be almost completely sanded down. Definitely all the parts that were touching up against each other. I think it just made a lot more work for me to begin with. I mean, it took a whole like month and a half of just sanding. But even before we got to that, the first piece that I printed, as I mentioned earlier in the video, just regular resin, but as soon as I'm inserting the very first pin, it's just shattering apart. I know that resin shatters, and yet I was surprised how much it shattered on me. That was the first time I was questioning whether this project was gonna work or not. Thankfully, I did discover that there is an ABS-like resin, much more resilient, and it allowed us to build this piece here, but it's far from perfect. We got hinges working, but then just in trying to be overly cautious, I re-drilled in all of the pinholes, which of course made some of them a little bit loose, but I think I was preferring that over being overly tight and then risking more breakage, which did unfortunately happen. Before we got to the paint job and I had everything sanded down and I tried to assemble it completely, it was almost impossible. It was just a little bit too loose at that point. So I focused on the paint, which is now something that I'm more comfortable with, and then did the reassembly after that, focusing then on trying to get those loose joints a little bit tighter. And for the most part, we got there. Kiki's joint solution does help quite a bit. It's the most I've ever used on any figure ever. And now that I've used so much of it, I'm a little bit more familiar with it. It's kind of like Crazy Glue, but without the sticking part. It just adds a layer, I don't want to say residue, because it sticks on there, which is what helps to make the joints nice and tight. But if you end up putting a little bit too much, it can make the joints look a little bit unseemly, a little bit messy, which is why you want to have it like on the inner joint, as much on the inside as possible where you're not really going to see it. But I had to use so much that it's like, you can really see it. You probably saw it in the earlier shots. So there's no escaping that. Now he does stand, but I'm afraid to touch him because he's still a little bit delicate. We got to this point though where he's in one piece, fully painted, fully assembled, and I guess I'll call that a success. But then we had to transform him. So on a regular custom, having your paint rub off is always going to be an issue. We can never really escape that, right? And on this 3D printed Jazz, because the pieces are a little bit overexposed, a little bit larger than what they're meant to be, those pieces are definitely rubbing up against each other. And I tried to compensate for that with all the sanding. Some of it was a little bit inescapable though. We obviously got them to a vehicle mode, but some of the rotations are a little bit tight where instead of risking the paint scratching, I just did a bit of a partial disassembly and put it back together in car mode. I know. He's basically a parts former, right? That's fine. That's totally fine. In fact, I left out some pieces in vehicle mode. Underneath that car, we basically don't have the head and we don't have the arms. That was just me being overly precautious to not mess up the paint as much as possible and risk other things breaking. Although unfortunately, how can I say this lightly? I don't think he's ever gonna transform again, folks. I think I had about 3 or 4 hinges just kind of break, just fully snap on me, even though I was trying to be as careful as possible. It happened. We got to vehicle mode though. I wish I could have made it look a little bit tighter, have all the seams nicely closed, but because it was for the most part loose pieces, kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, had a bit of roughness. Now, let me say this, none of that was the fault of the design itself. B from Nectar Mechanics did a fantastic job of designing this modern Porsche G1 Jazz for us. Just knocked it out of the park. And again, check out the video where he goes through the whole process of designing the dude based off of a sketch that I did. That's kind of amazing. That is incredible, incredible work. I hope I did it a little bit of justice, at the very least with a shiny coat of paint. And he very much treated it like a model kit, meaning that all of the colors on this guy are separate pieces. It does minimize the masking you need to do to get to this final piece. That's excellent. And on top of that, we have 2 face plates and 2 different hands as well. You have options here, folks. God, I love that so much. I really do love the open smile face. That's just so jazz. And it really does accomplish my pie-in-the-sky dream of what would an actual modern Porsche G1 Jazz look like. The last time we got this close was alternators. I don't know if y'all remember this. Fantastic figures. And when we finally got to Jazz, sadly, he was not a Porsche. He was some kind of a Mazda vehicle. The vehicle looked great, and we got it a nice white color. No striping though, but it was a modern Jazz in a sporty car. And now at the very least we see him as a modern Porsche. I think he looks freaking fantastic. Just a simple racing stripe is all we need too. I did of course add the Porsche emblem on the hood of the vehicle. Kind of brings it all together. A little bit of an extra detail there, love that. And I don't know, having the Autobot emblem on the side of the hood, I kind of like that. Kind of makes it seem like it's a badge, like a badge of honor maybe. I don't know. I mean, you could easily add one on the center right on the racing stripe. Of course, nothing wrong with that, but I like this. I like that off-center look. But yeah, I think it's safe to say this has been my longest project so far. Almost, not really surprising though, it's the most different project I've ever done. 3D printing a transformer. And B, I gotta tell you dude, thank you for letting me join you on this journey in realizing this little guy. Sorry it took so long though. I know that ever since he made this one, he's actually redesigned this into Sideswipe and also made an Optimus Prime that gives Studio Series Prime a run for his money. Amazing stuff, amazing stuff. I guess B, the one question I have left for you is, would you like to trade Jazzes? Look, maybe he won't transform anymore, but as a token of my appreciation, I'd love to send this over your way, dude. And I would be honored to have your 3D printed Jazz as a part of my shrine to Jazzes. Don't even worry about shipping, I'll cover it both ways. But let me know, dude. Hit me up on Discord. I'd love to do a Jazz swap with you. And for everybody else, maybe you're thinking, well, damn, I wish I could get a Jazz too. Yeah, I know, I'm sorry. I think these are the only 2 that exist in the whole planet. So yeah, that kind of sucks. But wait! It turns out you can purchase the 3D files from B's page at colds3d.com. I will have the link down in the description below, so do check it out. And if you do make one, do me a favor. Do show me on the socials or on Discord, because I would love to check it out. I'm sure B would as well. Feel free to tag us. And if you print it with resin, may the force be with you. I wish you the best of luck. I mean, if you're experienced, you'll do great. You're gonna do great. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. But as challenging as this was very rewarding. And so hopefully you all had fun checking this out as well. Thanks for sticking with me on this long journey here. I promise you this channel's not dead. We're gonna get back to some more regular customs here real soon. But I wanna thank you very much for watching. As always, feel free to like and subscribe. Leave a comment. I do love seeing them. Hit me up on the socials. Catch up with everything that I'm doing. And if you'd like to support this little channel, you can become a channel member. Use some awesome emotes here. We've also got a merch store with some great stuff there. Or of course, become a Patreon over at patreon.com/hobbies with Jose and pick out a tier that works best for you. Coming up real soon here, I've got about 37 boxes to open up. So please look forward to those. But of course, we're gonna get back onto our road to Menasor. And I can't wait to work on who's next.